Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. We are currently talking about, is Christian nationalism a good thing? We're also talking about, in that framework, what has Christian nationalism given us? And the bottom line on that, we're kind of using two definitions for Christian nationalism. Number one, MSNBC had someone that said Christian nationalists believe that their freedoms come from God and not government. I qualify on that. And secondly, looking at it as the application of Scripture to government principles. And when we realize that, yesterday we talked about that in that sense, Christian nationalism gave us the true separation of church and state. Historically, up until that point in time, religion was tied so tightly to government, to the monarchies and so forth. And it was not uncommon for people to be persecuted, to be killed, if their religion was not favored by the government. And that's one thing you've got to understand. When government gets involved in determining what you should think and what you should believe, they're usually not very forgiving. That's just human nature. And so with this, Christian nationalism gave us that separation of church and state as defined by the First Amendment, not a lot of this nonsense that people are spouting today. Government can't establish religion, nor is it to prohibit the free exercise. That's true separation of church and state, and I'm 100% for the First Amendment. Now, with this, one of the things we have to understand, and this is going to become more critical to us as time goes by, and that is the difference between freedom of worship and freedom of religion. Now, Genesis 1:26, I'm just going to read part of it, where it says that God made man in his image, his likeness, and he said, let them have dominion. See, that's the basis. God created self-government. He created a situation where everyone is accountable to him. I have to give account for myself. You have to give account for yourself. Now, in this, that's where I'm accountable for worshiping God. I'm accountable for obeying God. Government is not accountable for whether or not I obey God from that standpoint. And that's why they need to not establish a religion. I'm accountable for that, not them. But with this, one of the things that you will hear, and with this, just understand that when you hear different terms being used, it's usually for a purpose. You see, we hear about migration today rather than immigration. That's a political ploy to change the narrative. Anytime terms are changed, it's always to change the narrative. And you'll hear people now talking about freedom of worship. The First Amendment does not give us freedom of worship. It gives us freedom of religion. You see, freedom of worship, if you follow that, then you're allowed to worship God how you want. But you could be restricted to your home and to your place of worship. You cannot take it into the marketplace. You cannot practice it outside of your home or outside of your church or synagogue or mosque, whatever. You couldn't do that because you have freedom of worship. The First Amendment doesn't give us freedom of worship. It gives us freedom of religion. It is not to prohibit the free exercise of religion, because that involves how I serve God in every part of my life. Christian nationalism gave us freedom of religion. God bless you. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Ecclesia Principles with Ray Eppard. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook on our Ray Eppard pages. This program was brought to you by Victory Worship Center and World Outreach. Services Sunday 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock, 200 Hammond Lane, Stanton, Virginia.